Chapter 8, Job Hunting. The sun was just cresting over the horizon as Erin galloped along in the meadow just outside of Ponyville. She had always enjoyed going for a morning run when she had still been human, but that was something that she hadn't really able to do once she started working for Project Harmonix. She had missed this, running through the quiet mornings as life was just waking up. She had a feeling of both seclusion and of connection to the vastness of the world around her. It was slightly chilly this morning, as autumn was apparently approaching, though it was not yet cold enough for frost. The crisp air invigorated her as it rushed through her nose and lungs, heavy with the scent of dampness and growing things. The dew-laden grass brushed against her legs as she ran, leaving her soaking wet halfway up her legs. In the distance, she heard birdsong as the first of the morning birds began greeting the new day. It all made her smile with the simple joy of it. The morning was so perfect that it was almost like it was carefully crafted by a master artisan. Finally, feeling pleasantly tired and warmed by the exertion, she trotted back over the bridge and into town, walking back to the guest house once again. She noted the first stirrings in the Ponyville market, as yawning ponies ventured outside to start the process of opening their stores. The sweat cooling on her back and flanks caused her to shiver, and she decided that it was well past time for a shower. One thing she'd noticed when she'd left the guest house that morning was that the door wasn't locked. It did have a lock installed, just a simple slide bolt on the inside. But, judging by the look of it, it was apparently seldom used. She wasn't sure if that was because the guest house was semi-public, or if ponies in general were just that trusting. She stopped by her room to grab her brush and other toiletries, and then made her way down the hallway towards the bathroom. She quickly snagged a towel in her teeth from the linen closet as she went. Luckily, it was early enough that the shower was unused. Dropping her grooming supplies, she went in, slid the bolt on the door, and started up the water. The pressure for the shower was a bit lower than she liked, but still more than sufficient to spray yesterday's dirt and this morning's sweat from her coat. She sighed in contentment as the hot water massaged her muscles, relaxing away aches that she hadn't really been aware of before. Conscious of the other guests staying in the house, she didn't linger too long. She scrubbed herself quickly and shampooed and rinsed her mane and tail, and was soon stepping out of the tub into the steamy air. She dried herself as well as she could with the towel, and then brushed her teeth. Following that, she quickly combed out her mane, tail and coat. Once cleaned and groomed, she took the towel out back, filled up the washtub, poured a measure of soap into it, and scrubbed the towel out quickly, placing it on the line to dry. Then, with a rumbling in her belly, she retired to her room and made a quick snack out of what was left of the parcel that Applejack had left her the previous day, which included another delicious apple, a couple of apple tarts, and the last of the bread and jam. Finally, she felt ready to face the day in Ponyville. She slipped on her now mostly empty saddlebags, in case she had more things to carry, and left her room. The rest of the house still seemed to be asleep, so she proceeded as quietly as she could out the door once again, closing it softly. By this time, the Ponyville open-air market was a bit livelier, as shopkeepers were setting up stands and stalls around the market square. Not much business was being done yet, just a few early morning shoppers eager to beat the rush, but every pony she saw was still friendly and smiling, though sometimes the smile morphed into a yawn. With some surprise, she saw that Applejack had her own stall set up, selling apples and a small selection of baked goods. She trotted over to see her, and to thank her again for her earlier hospitality. "Ah, shoot, Sugar Cube, it weren't no big deal," the orange pony said with a slight blush. "Did you get all settled in okay?" "Oh, yeah, the guest house is amazingly comfortable. I can't believe it's so nice for how little it costs." "Well, we may not be all that fancy here in Ponyville," Applejack said proudly, "but we sure do know how to treat a guest." They chatted for a bit longer, but Erin started feeling a little uncomfortable as ponies started lining up at AJ's stall. Unwilling to get in the way of her business, she excused herself to go look for work, promising the farm pony that she'd stop by again when she had the chance. The help wanted board was right where Meadowlark had said it would be, and Erin spent some time reading it. She disregarded a recruitment poster for the Equestrian Royal Guard, which asked her, "Do you have what it takes to join the elite of the elite?" Erin decided that, on the balance, no, she did not. She then saw an ad for help with gardening, posted by a mare named Carrot Top. Studying the address for a moment against her map in order to memorize the location, she trotted off. She'd never really gardened before, but honestly, how hard could it be? *****. I'm so sorry, I just don't know how this happened," Erin said, tears in her eyes. A badly kinked garden hose lay between her front hooves, looking deceptively innocent. "It's fine, really, don't worry about it," Carrot Top said, scraping the mud off of her flanks. "I don't think I'll be needing any more help from you today, though." Erin walked away morosely. She glanced back once to see the mare shaking clods of dirt out of her orange mane. Who knew that gardening could be so tough? *****. Back at the help wanted board, Erin scoped out the remaining jobs, eliminating any that had anything to do with gardening. She saw another likely job that was asking for help rethatching several roofs in town, specifically stating that they'd take young, untrained individuals. Okay, Erin thought, time for round 2. This shouldn't be too hard. *****. Click click click, click click, click click, click click, click click. Erin opened her eyes again as the wheel finally slowed to a halt. The cart full of dry straw for the thatching was only half visible in the street, as the front half was protruding out of the side of one of the houses they had been intending to thatch today. The foreman, a green earth pony named Burly Bale, took off his hard hat briefly to massage his temple with his hoof. He then surveyed the damage before him. There were a couple of small stands knocked over, some slight damage to one house, and a nearly empty rain barrel that had been knocked over. Fortunately, no ponies had been hurt. Erin stood in front of him, trembling slightly in shame and humiliation. She opened her mouth to apologize, but Green Stallion held up a hoof to cut her off. "Just go," he said. Head hung low, Erin walked glumly away. *****. By the time she returned to the help wanted board, Erin had managed to reclaim some of her confidence. She stared again at the board. Something in here had to be a job that she could manage. Grimacing in concentration, she looked at, then rejected, post after post. Finally, she lit upon something that she knew she could do. She'd done it in college, after all, to earn some extra money. Once again memorizing an address against her map, she trotted off, determined that this time, she'd be able to do it. After all, it's not like painting houses was hard, or anything. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. In a foul mood, Erin once again returned to the board. She had just returned from her second shower of the day, this one administered from the end of a garden hose, rinsing the white paint off of her hindquarters and tail. She still felt pretty damp, but at least this time, the only pony that she had messed up on had been herself. Oh, yeah, she thought, snorting ironically, I'm doing much better now. Trying to regain some optimism, she once again started scanning the board. Aha, some couple named the cakes needed babysitting. How hard could that? Erin caught herself quickly. Each time she had thought that, it had ended up in disaster. She shuddered briefly and decided not to take a chance on babysitting quite yet. Besides, did pony babies wear diapers? How would she change them if they did? She didn't exactly relish the thought of changing a diaper using her mouth. One ad caught her eye, yellowed and faded, covered up with newer ads. After she moved the newer ones aside with a hoof, she stared blankly at a very familiar-looking purple and orange logo in stunned disbelief. She had to blink several times before she could make out what it said. FedEx looking for dependable ponies for deliveries, followed by an address to apply to, and the name of the local manager, Mr. Speedy Parcel. Erin marveled at the coincidence at how a company could have such a similar name and logo, and yet be on a completely different world. Whether or not she got the job, she decided that she had to check this out. As she headed towards the street listed, she determinedly stopped herself from thinking in any way about how easy this would be. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. The bell above the door chimed as Erin opened it. The interior of the FedEx store was slightly dingy and dusty, with only one thin, elderly stallion standing behind the counter. Hello, and welcome to Fetlock Express, he said, clearing up one small mystery regarding the name of the store. Did you have a package you wanted delivered? No, Erin replied, and the grey stallion behind the counter sagged in apparent disappointment. I've come to apply for the job. My name is Sunflower. Oh, that's fantastic. We could use the help. The gangly old stallion perked up and walked around from behind the counter. He was wearing a bright purple jacket with brass buttons, under which his coat was a dark brown in color. Under his peaked purple cap he had a steel grey mane, which matched his tail. On his flank was a cutie mark that looked like a plain brown package with, for some reasons, flames shooting out the back of it. My name is Mr. Parcel, and it's a real pleasure to meet you, young filly. Now, have you been in town long? Actually, I just arrived yesterday. I'm staying in the Ponyville guest house for now, and I needed work. I wouldn't mind being a delivery pony, and I'm willing to work hard. Well, I don't usually hire ponies without references, but we're really short of these days. I've been having trouble hiring any pony, so I've been losing business to the reps. Reps? Erin asked, confused. Royal Equestrian Postal Service, Mr. Parcel said, pointing a hoof towards the window. Erin glanced outside and saw a large, ornate building across the street. A grey Pegasus pony with a bright yellow mane and wearing a navy blue uniform was just walking out the front door, adjusting her heavily weighted saddlebags. She glanced up, saw Erin looking, and waved merrily before winging off into the sky. Mr. Parcel sighed. It's a darn shame you aren't a Pegasus, but I'm more than happy to sign you up on a trial basis. The pay for now is 20 bits a day, up to 30 if you should work out and are still around after a month. Does that sound good to you? Oh, absolutely. Though, would I be able to get paid soon? I mean, I don't have any bits right now. I'm okay for the moment, but after tomorrow the guest house will start charging me. Not to mention that I'll need to buy food soon. Well, I'm sure I can see my way to paying you for a day's work at the end of your shift. That should give you enough bits to get by until payday. That's on Fridays, by the way. Now, come on into the back room, and let's see if we've got a spare uniform that will fit ya. Erin trotted after him, excited to finally have a job, though she didn't relish the thought of having to wear a jacket like the one the old stallion was wearing. She was fairly sure the bright purple would clash with her mane and coat. Mr. Parcel nosed around in a few old bins, finally pulling out a jacket and matching pair of heavy-duty saddlebags to go with it. Erin struggled briefly to get into the uniform, and when she finally popped her head out of the collar, the old stallion plopped a hat onto her head. And there we go, he said, sounding pleased. Welcome to the family. There's just 3 of us right now, including you, so we've got a tremendous backlog. Do you know your way around town very well? Nope, Erin said cheerfully, but I do have a map. She walked over to the locker that Mr. Parcel had given her to hang up her own saddlebags and took the map out with her teeth, tucking it into her new saddlebag. That'll do. You'll eventually get to know your way around. Come on, now, and we'll get you loaded up and on your way out. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. Mr. Parcel seemed pleased as Erin trotted in through the door for the 3rd time that day, having already made 2 delivery runs. My goodness, miss, you sure do work hard. I hope you're pacing yourself, and not just doing this to impress me. Oh, no, I could keep this up all day, Erin replied cheerfully. As she had gotten more familiar with the layout of the town, she had managed to pick up her pace considerably, and needed to consult the map less and less often. Although, I could use a lunch break soon, she said, as her stomach rumbled briefly. Well, I'll tell you what, let's give you an hour off. Oh, did you say you were short on bits earlier? At Erin's nod of confirmation, he reached down and pulled up a small, jingling bag and tossed it to her. Erin caught the drawstring in her teeth. There you go, half a day's wages for half a day's work. 10 bits, you should be able to pick up something to eat with that. But first, come on in the back room and we'll get you out of those saddlebags. Erin nodded and trotted after him, taking out the signature sheet as she went. She had been given a clipboard with pen attached to it by length of string. Every delivery required a signature, and the sheet attached to the clipboard had a list of names and addresses, as well as tracking numbers for the deliveries, which mostly turned out to be small packages. Each time she had completed her deliveries, she had returned to the office, dropped off the old form and picked up a new one, along with a fresh batch of deliveries in her saddlebags. So far, the ponies of Ponyville remained pretty friendly, with the exception of a few that had obviously been woken up by Erin's knocking, or otherwise interrupted. Still, even those ponies that seemed the most annoyed at the interruption had still thanked her, which was nice. In the event of no pony being home, she left a prepared self-adhesive note that told the resident of the delivery attempt on the door, and checked the box marked absent on her sign-in sheet. There had been just a handful, or rather, a hoofful, of those, though. As she walked past the front desk, she dropped her latest sheet into the delivery completed basket, and placed the clipboard on top of a stack of similar boards on the countertop. She then followed Mr. Parcel through the swinging doors into the back room. Once in the back, she struggled out of her oversized, heavy-duty saddlebags and back into her more normal-sized ones, dropping the bag of bits into one of them. She opted to keep the coat on for now, since it was too big of a pain to get on and off casually. The hat, however, got left behind. Then, thanking Mr. Parcel, she trotted out of the store, completely content with her current lot in life. She wasn't sure where to go for lunch, so she decided that she would take some time to go see Applejack in the town square. Her deliveries had taken her past the apple seller several times, but the orange pony had been too busy selling her apples to notice her. Erin had noted that there seemed to be quite a line for Applejack's goods, which was not surprising, considering the quality of the apples and baked goods. As she entered the town square, she saw that Applejack had a customer. Only one, though, a familiar puffy-maned pink pony was standing at the front of AJ's stall and staring at the farm pony with intense suspicion etched into her features. AJ, in return, was glaring back at her. As Erin approached, she heard the orange pony speaking angrily to the pink one. "I'm tellin' ya there the last time, Pinkie Pie, I ain't hiding nothin'. Ya got that? Well, my pinky sense is telling me that some pony is hiding a really big super duper important secret." Pinkie retorted. Then she saw Erin approaching out of the corner of her eye, and turned to wave at her, the suspicion replaced instantly by a big, sunny smile. "Oh, hi Sunflower, are you still expecting that welcome party?" "Hi Pinkie Pie, well, I wasn't a minute ago, but I am now that you reminded me." "Oh, darn it," Pinkie said, pouting. "I wasted the opportunity. Oh, and there goes my pinky sense again. If it's not Applejack, then." Pinkie trailed off thoughtfully. Just then, a rainbow streaked overhead. Pinkie's eyes narrowed back into their former suspicious manner. "Rainbow Dash," she growled, scowling fiercely at the rapidly receding prismatically maned blur. Then her face popped back into its normal cheerfulness. "Well, I gotta go force a confession out of Dashy. See you guys later, and sorry for bugging you, Applejack." "I swear," Applejack said with a sigh as Pinkie bounced away, "I don't know what goes on in that girl's head sometimes." Erin laughed at that. Pinkie's behavior did seem a little erratic. "Anyway, what can I do ya for, Sunflower?" "Well, I just wanted to mention that I've got a job now." "I figured that, what with the uniform and all," AJ replied with a grin. "Also, I was just starting my lunch break, and I was wondering if you knew of any places around here that were good but not too expensive. I got some of my pay, but it's only 10 bits. "Well, 10 bits'll get you a pretty fancy meal, if you wanted to spend it all at once. But I reckon, you want to keep most of it." At Erin's nod, Applejack continued, "Well, there's the Cafe Carty over yonder, they make a pretty mean daffodil and daisy sandwich, and not too pricey, neither." "Well, that sounds good," Erin said, in spite of her reservations about a flower sandwich. Just then, several ponies started approaching Applejack's stall, so Erin quickly asked about the cost of the apples. It wouldn't hurt to have a few for a snack later on, after all. "Those are 4 for a bit, or a dozen for 2, take your pick," Applejack said cheerfully. "Oh, well, heck. I guess I'll get a dozen, that sounds like a pretty good deal." Applejack helped load the apples into Erin's saddlebags and then waved before turning back to her new customers. Erin waved back, and made her way in the direction Applejack had pointed. A few moments later, she was sitting on a bale of straw at a table, sipping a glass of ice water, and looking through the menu curiously. There were, unsurprisingly, a large number of various salads for sale, as well as fresh plates of veggies and fruits. There were also a variety of appetizers, such as hay fries, egg rolls, cheese curds, and the like, and a truly stunning variety of soups. Erin found the sandwich section and decided to give the daffodil and daisy sandwich a shot. A surprisingly short time later, the waiter brought out a plate that had a fairly large sandwich on it, along with a gigantic pile of what the menu had called hay fries. Erin stared briefly, overwhelmed. The portion sizes were more than generous, and the whole meal had cost her only 3 bits so far. She delicately picked up the sandwich and peeked inside. Definitely daffodils and daisies, all right, but no stems were in evidence. Instead, the flowers rested on a bed of what appeared to be an oddly broad-leafed variety of grass, and the whole thing had a slightly spicy-smelling sauce drizzled lightly over it. Erin took an experimental nibble, and the flavors exploded in her mouth. She wondered briefly if the food here in Equestria would ever stop amazing her, or if she was in for a steady diet of amazing foods. She wasn't sure what the sauce was made of, but it complemented the greenery beautifully, and the bread was thick, soft and wholesome, with an almost nutty flavor. Erin did her best to not simply gobble the whole thing down like a greedy pig, but it was hard to avoid it. Instead, she tried the hay fries. Well, she thought after a moment, I guess the only surprise here is how flavorless these are, compared to everything else around here. She nabbed another hooful and munched on them. Still, they seem to be pretty addictive. Erin chewed her way through a few more fries, and then took another bite of the sandwich. Leaning back on her straw bale seat and occasionally helping herself to another hooful of the fries, she glanced up at the sky. It still amazed her to see Pegasus flying around, and once again she found herself regretting that she couldn't have been one of them. It would have been a blast, being a Pegasus. To be able to get up above the rooftops, and see the world spread out before her. To ride the air currents, and to experience that kind of freedom. To be able to push the clouds around with her hooves. Erin blinked, staring, not really sure that she'd seen what she thought she'd seen. She shook her head, and then looked again. Above her, a light purple Pegasus with a blonde mane was maneuvering a cloud over the town, pushing on it with both of her front hooves. Erin stared in awe as the Pegasus brought the sullen-looking black cloud over to a small patch of grass in the town square, leaving it suspended just 20 or so feet off the ground. Then her jaw dropped open as the Pegasus flew to the top of the cloud and jumped up and down on it. A short burst of rain dropped from the cloud, which faded from black to gray, and then to white. Nodding in satisfaction, the Pegasus flew underneath the cloud and pushed it back up to the sky, returning a minute later with another sullen-looking black rain cloud for a different patch of grass. Erin was having trouble believing the evidence of her own eyes once again. She had dismissed previous talk about Pegasi, working on the weather, or similar as just some form of hyperbole or euphemism, assuming that the Pegasi in question worked in meteorology. That had made sense to her, seeing as how they could get right up to the clouds for observation. Seeing this, though, Erin was in a state of pure wonderment. The unicorn's telekinesis had been an amazing, though expected, thing for her to see. This was purely magical to her. She looked around for more Pegasi, and saw that many were doing the same or similar things, maneuvering rain clouds over various patches of vegetation and triggering a brief downpour, or moving clouds out of the way of the sun so that the plants below could get plenty of light. Erin realized that she was smiling, a big ear-to-ear grin that she couldn't seem to control. She probably would have spent hours staring at the Pegasi in wonder if it hadn't been for her waiter breaking her concentration by asking her if she needed anything else. She jerked her attention back to her meal, surprised to see that she had somehow managed to finish off the tasteless but addicting hay fries without even realizing it. Half of her sandwich remained on the plate, though Erin felt absolutely no hunger at the moment. The waiter bagged up the sandwich for her, and Erin paid the bill, leaving an extra bit as a tip. Counting the apples she had bought earlier, she was now down to 4 bits. Time to get back to work and earn some more money. ****. Most of the rest of the day passed without incident, though Erin still would stare raptly at the occasional Pegasus moving the clouds around, whenever she happened to see one. One of the things that had been an unintended side benefit of taking this job had been a discovery of the current date, which put her previous studies of the history of Equestria into some context. Apparently, the ponies used the same names for the months and days of the week, and today was Wednesday, September 24, 1507 AF. She still had no idea what the AF stood for, though. One of her deliveries had been to a small cottage on the edge of what the locals called the Everfree Forest. Mr. Parcel had very sternly required a promise from her that she wouldn't enter the forest under any circumstances. Erin had given it, but a spark of curiosity had started burning in her. Mr. Parcel had told her only that the forest was extremely dangerous, and full of deadly creatures and plants, but hadn't really said much else about it. Nopany knows much about it, because Nopany with any common sense ever goes in there, he had said. Erin had brought the delivery, which consisted of several large packages, out to the cottage. The nearby forest did look pretty foreboding, in a general sense. Erin realized that it was the same creepy-looking forest that she had seen the previous day, when she had first arrived in Equestria. She decided that exploration could wait after all, and knocked on the cottage door in order to complete her delivery. The pony in question, named Fluttershy, hadn't answered at first. Erin had been about to leave a note and leave when the door cracked open slightly, and a timid voice said, "Yes. Hi, are you Fluttershy? I have some packages for you." "Oh, thank you," the pony said softly, opening the door and stepping out. She was a lovely thing, a soft yellow with a flowing pink mane that hung over her eyes. Erin could tell instantly that shy part of her name was spot on, as the pony both refused to meet her eyes, and also was apparently trying to hide behind her own mane. "This must be the medicines and supplies I ordered 2 weeks ago," Fluttershy continued. "Will it usually take this long to get deliveries?" "Sorry about that. FedEx has been a little understaffed recently. I just started today, and we're catching up. According to the manifest, though, it looks like this arrived back at the office last week, on Tuesday." "Oh, I see. That's good. Luckily, I still had plenty of supplies on hoof, so no little animals had to go without treatment." Erin glanced around as Fluttershy signed for her packages, noticing for the first time that there were a large number of creatures around, some small and fuzzy, and some small and feathery. "Are you a veterinarian, Fluttershy?" "Oh, yes. I take care of all of the creatures around Ponyville that I can, so it's very important that I get my supplies. Do you think that they'll come faster now?" Fluttershy trailed off, looking uncomfortable at having to have been so forceful. Erin shook her head. Something about this pony just made her want to give her a great big hug. "Well," Erin said, "like I said, I started now, and my manager seems to think I'm doing a good job, so things should start coming in much faster. I'll tell you what, though, as long as I work there, if I see a package come in for you, I'll make it a priority to get it out to you as fast as I can, okay?" "Really?" Fluttershy said, looking her in the eye for the first time. At first, she just looked surprised, and then suddenly a big smile broke out on her face. Erin blinked as a pair of wings unfolded from the pony's back and flapped a couple of times. She hadn't realized that Fluttershy was a Pegasus until just then. "Oh, thank you so much," Fluttershy said, looking genuinely happy. "That is so amazingly nice of you. Could I offer you some tea? I just brewed some up, it should still be hot." "Oh, thank you, Fluttershy. I would love to, but I still have lots of deliveries to make. How about the next time I come out, if time permits?" "That's a deal, and thank you, Oh, sorry, my name is Sunflower. It's a pleasure to meet you, Fluttershy, and I hope to see you again soon." "Thank you, Sunflower, and I'm looking forward to it." Feeling good about her encounter with the shy pony, and having drawn her a little out of her shell, Erin trotted back to the FedEx office, humming a happy little tune. Erin made several more runs that afternoon, much to Mr. Parcel's evident pleasure. Apparently, she had already moved through almost 3 days' worth of backlog in one day. "I'll tell you what," he said as she returned from her 5th trip after lunch, "I'll just make this your last run, and you can call it quits for the day. Just drop off this last order, and I'll pay you and you can have the rest of the night off." "Oh, are you sure? I'm okay to keep going for a while." "It's okay, girl. Honestly, as hard as you're working, we'll be caught up in no time. Keep this up, and I'll knock your trial period down to 2 weeks, instead of a month. Now, where's that manifest?" As Mr. Parcel started digging around through the paperwork on his desk, Erin started humming to herself, rocking back and forth on her hooves. After the day's earlier disasters at finding work, it was nice to find a job that she not only could do, but apparently could excel at. At the moment, it felt like nothing could spoil her good mood. "Ah, there we go," the old stallion said triumphantly, pulling a shipping manifest out of a folder. 1 load of books, 7 in all, going to the Ponyville Library, to the attention of one Twilight Sparkle. Erin stopped rocking abruptly. Well, dang. Author's notes. Some art for this chapter by Lightfalls. Chapter 9, A Slightly Awkward Tea. Erin stood outside the treehouse library and adjusted her saddlebags nervously. Then she adjusted her hat. Then she adjusted her uniform. As she started adjusting her saddlebags once again, she finally admitted to herself that no amount of adjusting would make her less nervous about facing the scrutiny of the Ponyville librarian once again. It briefly occurred to her that she could simply quit her job, but she shoved that thought roughly aside. Gulping down her fear, she knocked a hoof against the door and stood there awkwardly. Any hopes she might have entertained that nobody would be home were dashed within seconds as the door creaked open. This time it wasn't a small dragon answering the door, it was the lavender librarian herself. Oh, Twilight Sparkle said, obviously surprised to see her. Sunflower, right. My friend Applejack has nice things to say. Packages. Erin interrupted, shrilly and awkwardly. Internally, she flinched at her own clumsiness. I have a delivery for you. Sorry. She tried smiling at Twilight, but she had a feeling that it came off as a really awkward grin. I'm new, she said, intending that to be some sort of an explanation. She gave herself an angry mental kick. Could she act like any bigger of an idiot? Oh, these must be the books I ordered, how wonderful. I was starting to think they'd never arrive. The librarian's horn glowed with a purple nimbus and the packages lifted themselves out of Erin's saddlebags. Simultaneously, the pen lifted itself off of the clipboard and scribbled a quick signature. Erin snatched the clipboard away as soon as Twilight's telekinetic aura stopped surrounding it and stuffed it into her saddlebag, intending to beat a hasty retreat. Well, you have a good night, I'll be going now, enjoy your books and thanks for using Fetlock Express. She said, while backing away and grinning like a loon. Twilight Sparkle simply stared at her with a measuring expression. Sunflower, stop, she said once Erin stopped babbling long enough to take a breath. I'd like you to come inside, if you don't mind. I really should. I have work. It's getting late. Just for a few minutes. I'm sure you can spare the time. Applejack is a friend of mine, and she mentioned that she knew you and liked you, and I like to know my friends' friends. Erin continued to simply stare at her. Twilight smiled and stepped to one side of the doorway, leaving enough room for her to enter. Just a quick chat, I promise. Erin saw no polite way to refuse. Her options were to either bolt and run screaming through the streets of Ponyville, which was tempting but would draw unwanted attention, or go inside and have a chat with this incredibly strange unicorn. Oh okay, thanks. She stepped gingerly past the lavender mare and back into the large round main room once again. She saw Spike on a ladder with a feather duster, whisking away busily at a shelf full of books. Twilight called out as they entered and asked him if he wouldn't mind bringing in 2 cups of tea, and the little dragon cheerfully complied. Twilight watched him leave with a tender smile on his face. He's my #1 assistant, you know. He's been with me since he hatched, such a sweet little guy, she said, as she settled down into a cushion by a low table. Twilight's horn glowed again as she picked up and started fiddling with an old-fashioned quill pen. Erin took off her empty saddlebags and lowered herself awkwardly down on a cushion on the opposite side of the table, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for a means to escape. Twilight just smiled at her, though, and told her that she should relax. Please, she said, shaking her head, I really just wanted to learn a little more about you, that's all. AJ said you didn't say much about where you were from, is that right? Yeah. Things were very different there. Erin decided that her best course of action was the one she had followed the day before when talking to Applejack. Evade, but avoid outright lies and fabrications. If this unicorn was the head librarian, she'd be extremely hard to fool even with a good lie, and Erin didn't know enough about Equestria to make up anything resembling a good lie. Different, how? Twilight asked, tilting her head curiously. They were briefly interrupted by Spike, as he brought out 2 teacups on a tray that also held some lemon slices and a bowl of sugar cubes. Thank you, Spike. No prob, Twee, he said with a grin, then shimmied back up the ladder to start dusting again. Would you like any lemon or sugar with your tea? The librarian asked Erin, as she put down the quill and levitated one of the teacups over to her while simultaneously picking up her own. I'll take 3 sugars, please. A bit of a sweet tooth, eh? Twilight Sparkle said with a chuckle, levitating 3 lumps of sugar out of the bowl and delicately placing them in the cup before setting the cup and saucer on the table in front of her. Erin delicately picked the cup up in her forehooves and took a sip. The tea was very nice, a blend she'd never tasted before, a bit more peppery than she was expecting but still very good. And very hot. She placed the cup back in the saucer, resolving to let it cool a bit before taking another sip. She glanced up and saw that Twilight was stirring her own cup with a spoon, wielded by her magic, while looking at her curiously. I'm sorry, you were saying how your hometown was different. The librarian asked. Actually, I hadn't, but, well, to start with, there were only normal ponies. Erin flinched at that, thinking that it probably sounded like the equivalent of pony racism. Sorry, I mean, no unicorns or Pegasi. Applejack mentioned that, yes, it's very strange, but not completely unheard of. There have been the occasional villages that try to go it alone, villages of just earth ponies, unicorns, or Pegasi, but usually they're pretty small and don't last very long. And the ones that do, like Cloudsdale, tend to have cities or towns very close by that they can barter with. Cloudsdale, Erin asked. Oh, you haven't heard of it? Erin shook her head, and Twilight continued, it's a large Pegasus pony town, not too far from Ponyville. They manufacture a lot of the regional weather there. Of course, since it's in the clouds, it's pretty hard for non-Pegasi to visit. It suddenly occurred to Erin that if she could keep the unicorn talking, then maybe she could avoid having to give any answers as well as gathering information at the same time. She resolved to ask as many questions as she could. The unicorn chuckled, remembering fondly, of course, when Rainbow Dash entered the Best Young Flyer competition, I was able to find a spell that let most of the rest of us walk on clouds, so we could go and cheer her on. Erin blinked slowly. Twilight was talking about magic and spells as if it were perfectly normal, and it seemed to be a lot different than the simple levitation that she had assumed most ponies meant when they said magic. Erin's skepticism kicked in and immediately wanted to reject the very notion of magic and spells, but then she remembered 2 things. First, Twilight Sparkle, and every other pony she'd run into since she got here, apparently believed in magic. In order to fit in, therefore, it would be best if she at least pretended to believe in it as well. Second, and more disturbing, was the fact that she had spent a good chunk of the day watching Pegasi pushing clouds around just to water the grass. While there was almost definitely a rational, scientific explanation for all of that, she still couldn't help but wonder if, just maybe, magic really worked here. It would sure explain a lot. Erin considered that for a moment, and then noticed that the conversation had lapsed. She decided to try again to keep the librarian talking. Most of the rest of you? She asked. Oh, yes. Twilight took a sip of her tea, but didn't put it back down, simply levitating it off to the side slightly so it wasn't in front of her face. Fluttershy is a Pegasus, so she could already fly and cloud walk. And, at first, I tried to cast a spell to give a pony wings. But that was extremely difficult, and the wings I made were very delicate. So, the only one of us that got them was my friend Rarity. I'll let either her or Rainbow Dash tell that story, though, since it's properly theirs to begin with. Oh, okay. Creating wings on a pony was definitely way outside of what she thought telekinesis was capable of. So, either the unicorn was lying or exaggerating, or something else completely different was at work here. Definitely something to think about. So, this village of yours, were unicorns and Pegasi forbidden? Twilight asked after another sip of tea. No, not as such. Just that we'd never seen any. Well, not in real life, just in pictures and the like. And we had stories about them. But I'd never seen an actual Pegasus pony in person until I met Rainbow Dash at Sweet Apple Acres, and I think the first unicorn I met was Meadowlark at the guest house. Wow, that's really amazing, Sunflower, Twilight said, and Erin couldn't detect any sarcasm coming from her. She seemed honestly interested. Erin smiled tentatively at her, and Twilight smiled back. So, you don't have much experience with magic, outside of an Earth pony's inherent magic? Twilight asked, leaning forward eagerly. No, none at all, really. Erin felt confused for a minute, and tried to disguise it by taking a sip of her own tea. Earth ponies had magic. She hadn't seen any examples of that yet. It was something else to be on the lookout for. So, why did you leave your village? Twilight cocked her head as Erin set her teacup back down. Well, one big reason is, it's a big world, you know. I wanted to see more of it. That was absolutely true. Now that she was actually here, and safe, Erin's appetite for learning had awoken. Even without the menace of the black tide back home, she would have wanted to explore this place. Hopefully, she'd have the chance to do so even after she'd been turned back to a human. Just one reason, not the only one. Twilight was being way too insightful for Erin's comfort. It's a big reason, yes, but, well, the other reason I don't want to talk about, if that's okay. Erin studied the table, blushing at the quasi-lie she was telling. All this hiding made her really uncomfortable. Of course, that's completely fine. Erin glanced up in confusion. Had she heard some sympathy in Twilight's voice? Alarm bells rang in Erin's head. Well, said Twilight, sounding kind, Applejack is your friend, and Rainbow Dash seems to like you as well. And any friend of those two, I'd be honored to call a friend of mine, if that's okay with you. Oh, of course, Erin stuttered in reply, blinking in surprise. I have a lot to learn about Equestria. I guess you could say that. I'm a little sheltered that way. Would it be okay if I came by to read up on things? I don't like feeling like a stupid pony. Of course you can, Twilight said, standing up with a look of shock on her face, which quickly turned to anger. And who told you that you were a stupid pony? Erin flinched back in surprise at the fierceness of the formerly mild-mannered librarian's reply. Well, not any recently, I guess. I just feel that way sometimes. Especially just recently, you know, since there's so much I don't know. Twilight Sparkle frowned at her, and then spoke quite seriously. There is a massive difference between being ignorant of some things, and being stupid. Every pony is ignorant of something, but only those that refuse to learn can ever be considered stupid. Remember that, okay? Okay. Thank you, okay, Erin said, blinking with surprise at Twilight's intensity. And, as far as learning goes, feel free to use the library anytime, provided it's not the middle of the night. I usually leave the door unlocked, and if I'm not in, you can just help yourself to any books you need. Just don't take them out of the library without Spike or myself here to check them out for you, okay? Erin nodded, and Twilight continued, and, if you have any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. In excruciating detail, Spike said quietly as he moved the ladder from one section of shelves to another. Sorry, Spike, did you want to repeat that? Twilight asked, purple eyes narrowing in mock fury at her scaly assistant. I said, in exquisite detail, Spike lied smoothly, and the mares both laughed. They chatted for a little longer, mostly about Erin's experiences in town. Erin blushingly related her earlier blunders in trying to find work, and both Twilight and Spike laughed at her misadventures, though Twilight herself seemed oddly uncomfortable laughing about the gardening incident. After perhaps a half hour of talking, Erin glanced down and noticed that her tea was nearly gone. She downed the rest of it and stood up, satisfied with how this meeting had gone. Twilight seemed perfectly nice, if a little nosy. Nothing much to worry about, as long as she was careful what she said around her. Still, it was time to get going. Well, I think I should go finish off my shift, Twilight. Thank you for the tea and the conversation, both were very nice. As the librarian smiled at her, Erin turned to Spike and said, and thank you for serving the tea, Spike, it was very nice of you. And you're doing a great job on the dusting. Well, the dragon replied smugly, see that, Twilight. Some ponies show a proper appreciation towards hard-working dragons. You missed a spot, Twilight said, pointing with a hoof. Just there, see. Grumbling, the dragon shifted the ladder back to the previous set of shelves and started climbing back up them. Twilight laughed, and then turned towards Erin. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me, Sunflower. I look forward to knowing you even better in the future. Maybe one day, you can trust me enough to actually tell me why you really left your village. I'd like that, Twilight. We'll see. Thank you for the tea and the nice chat. Erin picked her empty saddlebags back up and flung them across her back, not bothering to strap them back on. She walked out of the door to the library, turned, and waved to Twilight, who was standing in the doorway with a slight smile on her face. Feeling much relieved, Erin turned and started trotting back to the FedEx office, humming a happy tune. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. Twilight Sparkle watched from the doorway as Sunflower walked away with a spring in her step. She smiled as the tan earth pony turned back to wave at her. She was quite different than the nervous, jittery mare that she had been when she first came into the library. Twilight smile faded into a slight frown as Sunflower turned a corner. Of course, she was probably nervous about anybody knowing her secret, and was probably worried that Twilight had guessed it on the night that they first met. Hopefully, she had managed to convince her that her secret was safe. She turned back inside, closing the door. As she walked inside, Spike stopped dusting the shelves and walked up to her. Well, he asked, how did it go? Well, she was definitely hiding something, but she never actually straight out lied to me, Twilight said. Just before the tea had been brought out, she had cast a spell to detect lies. It had been slightly difficult to remember to keep manipulating things in the room in order to provide a reason as to why her horn had been glowing, but the results had been worth it. She was sure, now, exactly what Sunflower's secret was, even though she wasn't completely sure of all of the details. Are you sure she's not a spy? The purple dragon asked excitedly. She was studying maps, history. I mean, come on. Maybe she's a zebra in disguise or something. Twilight laughed and rubbed a hoof on Spike's head. Don't be silly, Spike. If the zebra nations wanted to know about Equestria, they could just ask. Besides, Secra lives nearby. She'd make a better spy than Sunflower. At least she doesn't look like she's about to be pounced on by a Matacore just because some pony invites her in for tea. Well, then, how do you think it happened? She seems like such a normal pony, and she's pretty nice. She is, and I don't know. I've never encountered a pony with no magic at all, before. That's what had stopped Twilight Sparkle in her tracks the night before. Every pony had magic in them, though the unicorn had never really noticed that before. It was like a sound that was always in the background. Once you got used to it, you never noticed it until it suddenly stopped. And, not until she'd run into the one pony, probably in all of Equestria, who didn't seem to have any magic at all did she notice that she could feel the magic of other ponies. At first, she wasn't sure what it was that she had sensed coming from the strange pony. Just a feeling of oddness, of something out of place. Finally, it had clicked. Magic simply swerved around Sunflower, as if she didn't exist. As if she weren't an actual part of Equestria. Well, however it happened, Twilight said darkly, I'm betting it's the reason she got kicked out of her village. You think she got kicked out? Spike looked surprised, and maybe a little angry. Why would any pony do that? What use is an Earth pony without Earth pony magic? Twilight said, bitterly. You saw how embarrassed she looked when I mentioned Earth pony magic, and how ashamed she was when I asked her why she left. I think that something happened. Some accident or malady, with Sunflower right in the middle of it. Suddenly, Sunflower no longer had any useful magic, so she was probably made to feel very unwelcome at home. Did you hear Carrot Top complaining today at the market about the mess Sunflower made in her garden? What kind of Earth pony can't even garden? It's just too sad. Can you fix her? Spike asked, tears in his eyes. Twilight Sparkle smiled warmly at him, reminded of what a kind, sensitive little dragon he really was. I can't even imagine what kind of affliction would cause a pony to be completely cut off from magic like that. The librarian shuddered in suppressed horror. She couldn't imagine what she'd do if she were separated from her own magic in a similar fashion. But I promise you, Spike, I'll do everything within my power to find a cure for her. Horn blowing, Twilight took down her copy of Magical Maladies and Common Cures. A fairly simple book, but it was as good a place as any to start. But what if it isn't in your power? Spike asked her. And, do you really have time for that? Don't we have to get going soon? Twilight sighed and put the book aside. You're right, Spike. We do have to go. But don't worry too much. If it isn't within my power, I can always ask Princess Celestia. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. That took longer than expected, said Mr. Parcel as Erin walked through the front door. Sorry about that, Erin said. Twilight Sparkle wanted to talk to me for a little while, and since this was my last delivery, I thought I could take the time. Oh, it's not a problem. She orders lots of books. One of our best clients. It's always good to maintain good relationships with a pony as important as that. Did you know she's Princess Celestia's own pupil? What? Erin blinked in surprise. No, she never mentioned that. Ah, well, that filly doesn't like to brag all that much, but it's funny as heck to watch her lose her mind whenever the princess is scheduled to visit Ponyville. Lose her mind, Erin repeated, handing over the clipboard. How do you mean? Oh, she just tends to get a tiny bit nutty over preparing things when we're expecting a visit from royalty. A good pony, though. Incredibly talented magically, of course, but you'd expect that from Princess Celestia's own student. Anyway, go on and get that uniform off, and I'll get your pay together. Okay, Erin said, as she trotted into the back room. Mr. Parcel sure had given her a lot to think about. If Twilight Sparkle was the personal protégé of the princess, then she could probably tell her a lot about how the government here worked, as well as what the princess herself was like. She hung up the oversized saddlebags in her locker, stuck her hat on the locker's shelf, and then struggled out of the uniform jacket. Once she'd gotten that hung up, she belted on her own saddlebags and went back to the front area. Mr. Parcel had her sign off on the signature sheets that she had brought back that day, and had her sign another in a ledger stating that she had been paid 20 bits for 1 day's labor. He then forked over another 10 bits, which Erin added to the 4 already in the drawstring bag that he had given her earlier. She placed that into her bag and, promising to be back at 9 o'clock sharp the next morning, trotted out the door. Erin was still in a fantastic mood, made even better by the sound of bits jingling around in her saddlebags. She'd make sure to hold on to at least 5 of those, in order to pay for a room at the guest house for a week. It was a considerable relief to her to have the issue of housing resolved. Still, she was feeling peckish, and decided it might be nice to get something to eat. It was then that she remembered that she still had half a sandwich from Café Carty in her pack, along with a dozen apples. The sandwich, and maybe an apple or two, would do nicely as a late afternoon early evening snack. All she needed was a place to sit and eat, maybe a park or something. With that in mind, she trotted back to the market square, hoping to see Applejack again for a recommendation. Sadly, the orange mare was gone, as was her stall. Erin pouted briefly, then decided that she should just explore for a little while by herself. She had gotten a pretty good look at Ponyville today, delivering packages around, and one building in particular had stood out, both for the design and for the wondrous smells coming from within. After all, a confection or two would really round out her evening meal. In short order, Erin found herself standing in front of a store with a sign out front that said Sugar Cube Corner. She stepped inside, and stopped in surprise. The shop was mysteriously dark for some reason. Erin wondered briefly if they were closed or something, and had just forgotten to lock the door. She was just turning around to walk out when she heard the scuffling of hooves in the darkness beyond. Turning back, slightly scared and mildly creeped out, Erin called out meekly into the darkness. Hello, is Anyo, any pony there? There was a short giggle, rapidly stifled. Erin backed quickly to the exit, but froze in horror as she bumped into something. Turning her head slowly, she saw a dark shape between her and the door. Just as she was about to scream, the light suddenly flicked on. Surprise, said Pinkie Pie, a massive grin on her face. Chapter 10, Party Time. Wow, Sunflower, you should see the look on your face. Pinkie Pie said, laughing. You sure were surprised, weren't you? Erin could only nod while her heart galloped maniacally in her chest. She managed a weak smile at the grinning pink pony, who took that as encouragement to help her up. Well, don't just sit there, come on. I'm going to introduce you to every pony. Pinkie hooked a hoof under Erin's forearm and hauled her to her hooves. Every pony, I'd like to introduce our guest of honor, a brand new resident to our happy family here in Ponyville. Sunflower. Erin, still recovering from the earlier shock, smiled as best she could at the small crowd of ponies packed into Sugar Cube Corner's main floor as they started stomping their front hooves and cheering. She felt herself blushing at the attention, and also noted that ponies applauded by stamping. That was good to know, it would help her fit in. Come on, Sunflower, Pinkie said as the applause died down, let's go meet every pony. There were a surprising number of ponies at the party that Erin had already met, mostly while doing deliveries, but the bulk of the ponies were new to her. Most of them, oddly, seemed to be mares, with only an occasional stallion in the mix. She was amused to find out that the scientist's initial assessment of pony names was correct, and that many of the mares had flower-related names. This included a trio of apparently close friends named Rose, Daisy and Lily. Erin smiled at that, noting that the names wouldn't be at all unusual back on Earth. Once again, she noticed that all the ponies were very friendly and greeted her warmly, even those that she had met already during her deliveries. Though, she wondered how many of them were more interested in free cake and snacks than in meeting her. When Pinkie had introduced Erin to everyone to her satisfaction, the pink pony then said, okay, every pony, enough with the chit-chat. It's cake time. With that, the cake, which was roughly the height of a pony itself, was sliced and distributed on small paper plates. Erin held hers in her upturned hoof awkwardly, wondering how she was going to eat it. Looking around her, she saw that most ponies were simply holding the cake and taking large bites out of it. Giving a mental shrug, Erin did the same. She was expecting it this time, and she wasn't disappointed. The cake was amazing, perfectly moist without being too heavy, and with just the right amount of sugary frosting to complement without being overwhelming. After she swallowed her mouthful, she turned to Pinkie and complimented her on the cake. Oh, thank you. I've been getting better at it, though Mr. Cake actually helped with the decorations. I get too impatient to do a really detailed job like this. Well, it tastes incredible, Pinkie, Erin said. And, thank you so much for throwing this party. I know you said you would, but really, I'm just so touched that you would go through all this effort just for me. Quote. Pinkie Pie laughed at that and said, well, you're welcome, but it's not like I need much of an excuse to throw a party. Here, have a second slice of cake. Erin was about to turn it down, out of habit. Then the thought occurred to her that, if the scientists in the Ascent Labs could turn her back from a pony into a human, they could definitely take a few extra cake-related pounds off as well. With a grin bordering on the maniacal, she had a second slice. And then a third. A good chunk of the rest of the evening was lost in a sugar-induced blur. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. Twilight Sparkle was standing near a table, chatting with Applejack and Pinkie Pie. Rarity was off in a corner keeping company with Fluttershy, who didn't like mingling with crowds but who hated being alone even more. Rainbow Dash hadn't shown up yet, but that was most likely due to a nap running slightly longer than expected. Well, she sure looks like she's having a good time, Applejack said suddenly to Twilight, as the unicorn sipped from a cup of punch. Setting the cup aside, Twilight looked towards the guest of honor. Sunflower was busily swinging away, blindfolded, at a piñata hanging from the ceiling. Just 20 minutes earlier there had been a rousing game of pin the tail on the pony which Sunflower hadn't come anywhere near winning. But she had apparently just enjoyed the game for its own sake. Well, good for her, Twilight said, with satisfaction. Ponyville wasn't like her old village, wherever that was. Noppany was going to kick Sunflower out of town while she had anything to say about it. Granted, Noppany knew her secret, that she couldn't use magic, but Twilight herself wouldn't tell anybody about it. She sure does seem to be fitting in pretty well, for only having been here a little over a day, AJ continued. Twilight nodded at that. Well, the ponies here in Ponyville are extremely welcoming and friendly. I found that out myself on my first day here, if you'll recall. And I hope she makes just as many friends as I did. Something in the forceful way that Twilight said that seemed to strike the farm pony as odd, as she gave her a look. Something going on, Twee. The librarian shook her head in wry amusement. With the way she talked sometimes, it was easy to forget how insightful her hard-working friend could be. And how direct she could be. Well, I may have found out a little more about what her secret is, but... Ah, Pinkie, what the heck, Twilight spluttered, as Pinkie Pie finished a rather prolonged spit take that had launched a mouthful of punch into her face. Wait, are you saying the pony with the big super big secret is Sunflower? Pinkie asked, aghast. What are you talking about, Pinkie? Twilight asked, annoyed. Horn blowing, she began toweling the punch off of her face using a wad of napkins. For the last couple of days, my Pinkie sense has been going off randomly, Pinkie Pie replied. I knew that some pony had a big, dark secret. I thought it was Rainbow Dash. And, yesterday, y'all thought it was me, remember? Applejack said wryly. I apologized for that, the pink pony said, waving a hoof dismissively. I wonder what the big secret is. Pinkie Pie. Twilight said sternly. Pinkie turned to her, looking startled. I have some idea of what her secret might be, but it's personal and it doesn't concern you, okay? I want you to promise to leave her alone about it. Well, duh, Pinkie said, rolling her eyes. I'm not going to corner some pony at her own welcome party and try to harass a secret out of her. I only did that to Applejack and Rainbow Dash because I thought it was funny. And because we're best friends. But mostly because it was funny. It weren't all that funny, muttered Applejack. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. Erin finally felt the wooden bat in her teeth connect with the piñata. The ponies around her started cheering as the candy spilled out of it and onto the floor. Dropping the bat, she pushed the blindfold up out of her eyes. She grinned at the smiling ponies around her. This was really just too much fun. She hadn't had this much fun at a party since, well, ever. When she was little, her parents always had given her small birthday parties, just her brothers and her with a cake, no big deal. High school parties had just been awkward and uncomfortable, and when she had gotten into college, parties had been more about standing around and talking. Usually with loud music and alcohol thrown in to make the conversations just slightly shy of comprehensible. But this was amazing. The simple party games, the laughter, the incredible foods, this is what a party should be. She glanced around, trying to find Pinkie Pie, intending to thank her once again for the party and let her know just how much she appreciated it. She finally found the pink pony standing near a table chatting with Applejack and Twilight Sparkle. She left the huge mound of candy behind her, already being divided up by eager ponies, and walked over to talk to them. Perhaps it was the sugar. Maybe it was how much fun she'd been having. Either way, she was in a giddy and mischievous mood when she reached the table. Pinkie's back was to her, talking to her friends, so Erin sneaked up behind her. Once she had determined that she was close enough, she put her plan into action. She crouched down, tensing her muscles, and then suddenly sprung at the pink pony while shouting, "Surprise hug attack." Pinkie screamed in shock surprise as Erin's forelegs wrapped around her neck in a hug. Both ponies collapsed to the floor in a heap, Erin giggling like a maniac and Pinkie too momentarily stunned to react. Once her brain caught up with current events, the pink pony started giggling too. "Good one, Sunflower," she said. Applejack was chuckling, and Twilight was just staring at the two of them as if they'd both lost their minds. Erin untangled herself from Pinkie and sat down as Pinkie started to pull herself up off the floor. "Pinkie Pie, I just wanted to say, thanks, once again," Erin said as seriously as she could while still having a slight case of the giggles. "This party is incredible, and I'm having such a good time." "Of course," Pinkie said, giving her a big hug around the neck. If I'm interrupting something, I can come back later," Rainbow Dash said, coming up behind them. Erin laughed and disentangled herself from the hug. "Hey, Rainbow. When'd you get here?" Applejack asked, obviously happy to see her friend. "Just now, and sorry I'm late. I didn't expect the printers to take this long. They said they'd have the order ready by noon." The frustration was evident in the blue Pegasus voice. "You mean, they're finished?" Applejack said excitedly. "Let me see, Hold your horses." Rainbow replied, laughing, and dug a brightly colored page out of her saddlebag. She passed it over to Applejack, who laid it flat on the nearby table to take a good look at it. Erin poked her head around the side, curious as to what it said. The page was a flyer featuring a large trophy with a rearing pony superimposed on it. In bold, colorful lettering was the following: "You think you got what it takes to be an Iron Pony? You are invited to the first ever, all-comers Iron Pony competition. Saturday, October 11th at Sweet Apple Acres. Entering the contest is free, so what have you got to lose? If you don't want to compete, why not show up to cheer on your favorite competitor? Tickets are only 4 bits each for an adult, 2 for a filly or colt, foals get in for free. Free catering provided by Sweet Apple Acres. Bring the whole family. The contest starts at 10 a.m. Rules available upon request. Contestants, please register by the end of the day on Wednesday, October 8th with Twilight Sparkle at the Ponyville Library. Iron Pony competition." Erin raised an eyebrow at the poster. "What does that mean?" "Well, ya see, Rainbow and I had a bit of a disagreement last year over which of us was the better athlete." "It was me," Rainbow Dash interrupted. Applejack glared at her. "Only because y'all cheated, did not. You used your wings in almost all the events you won." "My wings are a part of me, so I didn't cheat." Applejack was just inflating her lungs to respond to this when Twilight stepped between the two ponies. "Girls," the librarian said sternly, "what's past is past, and I thought every pony learned their lesson last year." Both Applejack and Rainbow Dash looked sullenly at their hooves for a moment, and Twilight continued. "Besides, with the new rules in place, there won't be any talk of cheating this year, will there?" "I reckon not," Applejack said. At the same time Rainbow said, "You bet there won't." "Anyway, as I was saying," Applejack said, with a last glare at Rainbow Dash, who stuck out her tongue. "We had ourselves a little competition, and it attracted a mighty big crowd. So, I reckoned, why not do this every year? Sweet Apple Acres sure could use the money, and maybe this year, we can settle this once and bear all. And I thought that it would be nice if more ponies could enter," Pinkie Pie said. "After all, it would get boring if it were just Applejack and Rainbow Dash every year." "Oh, wow, neat. I'd like to go and see that," Erin said. "Oh, no you don't," Rainbow Dash said. "You are going to go see it, Sunflower." What? You're going to be in it? After all, you nearly outran me yesterday. You've got to go, just so we can have our rematch." "Oh, weren't we just going to race again? The last event for the competition is the running of the leaves. Which is a race, so, no matter how we all do in the Iron Pony competition, it's still going to end up as a race at the end. I finished 5th place last year," Twilight Sparkle said proudly. "Yeah, which isn't bad, for an egghead." "I beat you, Dash, remember," Twilight said with a frown. Yeah, only because AJ and I were concentrating more on beating each other than in winning the race," the Pegasus said, waving a hoof dismissively. "So, Sunflower, are you in or what?" "I'd sure like to see you in the competition, Sunflower," Applejack said. "Oh, well. Yes, why not? I'll be there," Erin said with rising determination. A contest sounded like just the thing to test her new pony body. The race the other day had been an unwelcome surprise, but over the course of a whole competition, she'd hopefully be able to surprise every pony. Great. I've got the rules printed up here. Rainbow quickly rummaged in her other saddlebag and pulled out another sheet, which she handed to Erin. Erin glanced at the rules quickly, then placed the sheet in her own saddlebag. She would read them later, once she had more time. The conversation continued from there, well into the night. Against her better judgment, Erin had yet another slice of cake, and plenty of punch. It was fairly late at night when most of the ponies, most of them yawning, started making for the door. Erin herself had worked through her sugar rush during the party, and now felt a major crash coming on. She was swaying gently back and forth on her hooves, staring glassily into space. She blinked in surprise when she realized that a pony had been talking to her and looked up into the concerned face of Twilight Sparkle. I'm sorry. What was that, Twilight? The unicorn laughed warmly and said, you look really out of it, Sunflower. Maybe it's time to go home and get some sleep. Erin smiled and replied, bed sounds really good right now, I admit it. But I don't want to leave while there are still ponies here. This is my party, after all. I should be the last one to go. Look around you, Twilight said, pointing with a hoof. Erin looked and saw that almost every pony was gone. Besides herself, only Pinkie Pie, Twilight Sparkle and Rainbow Dash had stayed. Applejack had left a couple hours earlier, stating that she had to be up at dawn to start her daily chores. Rarity had taken Fluttershy home even before that, the yellow Pegasus having reached her limit as far as company went. Erin had honestly not noticed that the other ponies had left. She was exhausted, but in a good way. She was feeling pleasantly mellow, slightly full from all the cake, and well disposed towards every pony. She was also unsuccessful at stifling a yawn. Well, I suppose since there's so few left, I could get going, she said, when Pinkie Pie suddenly popped up beside her. Ah, you're leaving already, the Pink Earth pony said with a slight pout. Well, I was thinking of it, Erin said carefully, not wanting to hurt Pinkie's feelings after she had gone through all this effort. I mean, I had a wonderful time, but I'm also really tired. It would be nice to get some sleep. Pinkie said, staring at her. Well, you can't go yet. Not until I get you a take-home box. With that, Pinkie bounced away, rummaging briefly behind the counter until she came out with a couple of large, folding cardboard boxes. Ignoring Erin's protests, she started placing large slices of cake, several cupcakes, a variety of cookies, and a lone cherry turnover into the boxes, wrapped them up, and bounced back to balance them across Erin's back. There you go. Plenty of cake and goodies. That should last you, at least through noon tomorrow. Pinkie said with a wide grin. Erin could only laugh, and hugged Pinkie around the neck. Thank you, Pinkie Pie. I'll always remember how much fun I had today. Pinkie hugged back, and shortly afterwards Erin was waving goodbye as she walked out the door, a tricky thing to do when you're walking on all fours. Pinkie and her friends waved back at her, wishing her a good night. It was fully nighttime when she left Sugarcube Corner, but the light provided by the extremely bright full moon was sufficient for her to see by, once she'd let her eyes adapt. Then she face-oofed, remembering that she could adjust her eyes to see in low light. A quick mental exercise later and the streets of Ponyville were as bright as day, though with the colors oddly muted. She walked back to the guest house, humming a happy tune, though quietly enough to not disturb any sleeping ponies. She arrived back home feeling whimsical and in the mood for a little nonsense. Smiling, she remembered the story about the two princesses, one of whom raised and lowered the moon every night. What was her name? Oh, yes. Thank you for the wonderful moonlight, Luna. It helped me find my way home tonight. Erin smiled and, feeling extremely silly, waved at the moon. Then she let herself inside, walked through the empty common area and into her room, barely taking the time to remove her take-home boxes and saddlebags before collapsing into bed. This time, she remembered to make her report. Once she was done yawning again, she began speaking quietly, summing up the day's events. Erin's journal, Day 2. Dear Dr. Belchick and the rest of the Harmonix team. Well, today was sure exciting. Before I get into why it was exciting, I'll just give you a quick status update. First, I have a job, yay. It's nothing too fantastic, just making deliveries, but I figured out that I'll be able to live off the salary I get with a few bits to spare for fun. Oh, that reminds me, I should check how closely the bits that were made for me compare to the actual equestrian bits I have in my saddlebags right now. I'll do that tomorrow, I'm exhausted. Anyway, like I said, my job is to deliver packages. What's good about that is that I'll get to know this area pretty well and meet lots of different ponies. Maybe soon I can save up enough to stay for a while in Canterlot, which is the capital of Equestria. Oh, and I've apparently become friends with the local librarian, who's offered to not only help me learn about Equestria, but is also the personal student of one of the princesses, Celestia. That could be invaluable if we're to open negotiations for migrating our population to Equestria. That would be exciting enough, but there's also the fact that I've recorded several instances of telekinesis amongst the unicorns, which I'm hoping will provide you with lots of data. Also, and I don't know how to describe this, I really don't, but apparently the local Pegasi can directly maneuver clouds for the purposes of irrigation. I know, it sounds crazy, but seriously, I saw them do it. They push them with their hooves, and then jump on them to get the water out. It sounds like a fairy tale, I know, but it's completely true. I can't wait to hear the analysis of the data. And, though this has nothing to do with the mission, the single most incredible thing that happened today was that one of the locals, Pinkie Pie, put together this amazing party for me. Just for moving here, can you believe it? The cake was amazing. Honestly, I've got some in a box here, and if you somehow manage to open a portal before it goes all stale, I'll pass it through just so you can try some. Anyway, that's it for now. I'd make a longer report, but I am completely wiped out. Between delivering packages and that party, I don't think I can keep my eyes open for much longer. Erin yawned again, then rolled over in bed. She was just drifting off when suddenly a thought occurred to her. Eyes springing open, she said, one last thing. I'd really appreciate it if you just deleted the footage of all my attempts to get work before I started working for FedEx. In fact, don't even watch it, if you don't mind. This is Erin Olsen, aka Sunflower, signing off. ****. Several weeks prior. A swarm of small autonomous vehicles flitted through the gap, each of them about the size of a raven, and each with 4 spinning fans to keep them flying and upright. They moved out in a coordinated pattern, spreading away from the portal on predetermined flight paths. Though each of them was capable of acting completely independently of the others, they were all connected wirelessly in order to communicate and coordinate their reconnaissance. All data was shared, in case one or more of the drones suffered damage, so that all information could be transmitted back to the Harmonics lab by any one drone. They never strayed far enough away from each other to cause a communications breakdown. Each drone, at all times, was within communications range of at least 2 others. From time to time, other portals would open up, spilling more small drones into the atmosphere and greatly expanding their range. They were programmed to avoid habitation and ponies in general, ducking out of sight should a creature get too close to it. One drone in particular buzzed its way over the threatening expanses of the everfree forest, flying between trees, studying life forms, taking readings. It even happened to stumble across a small and currently unoccupied hut, around which it circled widely around before zipping off deeper into the forest. For several hours each day the drone hovered above the trees, angling its solar panels to catch the rays of the equestrian sun to recharge its batteries. Then, swooping back underneath the canopy, it would once again begin its mindlessly dogged collecting of information. 2 months into its mission, the day that Erin came to Equestria, the small drone discovered a small area of the forest, dozens of miles away from any kind of civilization, where the trees were stunted, barren and twisted. The trees here were dying, looking as if they'd been exposed to an extended drought, though immediately outside the ring of dead trees green life grew in riotous abundance. The only life that seemed to have any real purchase within the ring were small scrub brushes, and even those were twisted and yellowed. In the exact center of this area, the sensors on the drone discovered a small cave. It flew around the cave in a complex, weaving pattern, examining the life and environment around it. Finally, it buzzed its way into the cave itself, and the sensors on the drone completely failed to notice the faint shimmering of a shield spell that completely failed to stop it from entering. A small light clicked on, chasing away the shadows as the drone moved about the cave, recording everything it saw. Not that the cave was very large, just a small depression in the earth, carved out of dark brown stone. However, into the walls of the cave were carved many runes and elaborate pictures, which triggered a subroutine in the drone's programming that made it stop and record every inch of writing that it could find. Once that was completed, the drone turned to leave. However, it found absolute darkness in front of it, darkness that its small light couldn't dispel. Had it been a living creature, it might have reacted with fascination or terror. Instead, it simply observed the unusual phenomenon for a moment, still recording and transmitting continuously. Until, suddenly, the shadows rushed forward, engulfing it. The last thing the drone was able to record as it tumbled to the stony floor was a voice, with a buzzing resonance that seemed to be comprised of 1,000 voices speaking all at once. The voice said one thing as the drone fell. Mine. Author's notes. Chapter 11, The Dangers of Cake. The day after the party, Erin followed pretty much the same routine as the previous day. Wake up early, go for a run before most of Ponyville even woke up, then return to shower. She helped herself to some breakfast from her saddlebags before she left for work, including the now slightly stale but still delicious sandwich from the cafe yesterday, a couple of apples, and a generous portion of cake. Having cake for breakfast made her smile as she thoroughly connected with her inner 8-year-old. As she was packing up her saddlebags, the jingling pouch of bits reminded her that she had intended to compare the real equestrian bits with the fakes she had been given. She pulled the pouch of gold coins out of the drawer in her room and spilled a few of them on the table. Then she took a few of her hard-earned equestrian bits out and laid them side by side. The first thing that became obvious was that the equestrian coins weren't gold. Or, at least not pure gold. Erin had no idea, they could be brass for all she knew of metallurgy. Or perhaps they were some mystery element found only in Equestria. The bits she had earned yesterday were a bright golden in color, similar to the gold coins from Earth, but slightly paler. They were also lighter, she decided after hefting a few. She didn't have a scale, so she wasn't sure by how much, but they definitely weighed no more than half as much as a similar volume of the pure gold coins she had received from the Harmonics team. The bits were plain, with a slightly raised ridge going around the edge. Her gold coins were just flat. Still, if gold was rare in Equestria, maybe they still had value. Perhaps she could sell them or trade them for real bits. She decided to keep her eye open for a money changer or a bank or something, and to maybe ask a few casual questions to find out if gold was worth anything at all. With that, she scooped up the bits and put them away, the equestrian ones back in her pouch in the saddlebags, and the earth ones back in their drawer. She belted her saddlebags on, cinching them tight with her teeth, and trotted out the door. It was another beautiful day in Ponyville, though a bit on the chilly side. Her earlier exercise had warmed her, but now she felt a little chill from her still slightly damp mane and tail. She'd have to make sure to dry more thoroughly in the future. Still, in spite of that, she was happy, going to a job she liked in a town that was rapidly growing on her. The thought occurred to her for the first time that, maybe once her mission was over and humanity started migrating, she could get her own house here. Of course, she was planning on returning to her human form, but hopefully the ponies here would be just as welcoming to her then as they were now. The idea of owning a small cottage near Ponyville, like Fluttershy's, had a massive appeal to her, and she couldn't help the goofy smile that spread across her muzzle. She knew that being welcomed as a hominid wasn't a sure thing, though. But she had reason to be optimistic. Ponies welcomed dragons, after all, and there had been hints of other intelligent creatures that the ponies dealt with. Surely they could accept humans as just one more species. It was while pondering that idea that she suddenly had a realization that stopped her in her tracks for a moment. If she was going to move to Ponyville after the human migration, that would require telling her new friends about what she had been up to, and that she wasn't really a pony after all. She frowned slightly at that. How would Applejack feel when she realized that her new friend, as casual as their acquaintance currently was, turned out to be a spy? An alien spy from an entirely different world. For that matter, how would Rainbow Dash, or Twilight Sparkle, or Pinkie Pie react? All of them had been so kind to her. Would they accept her as a human? Would they continue to be friends once she revealed her purpose for coming here? She hated to admit it, but she didn't think it was too likely. She tried to put herself in their shoes. How would she feel if an alien had befriended her, in order to gain the information it needed to invade her planet? Would the alien's desperate situation make any difference to the feelings of betrayal she would be sure to feel? Maybe, she admitted. But probably not enough of a difference to ever trust that alien again. especially if the aliens came in with guns blazing, or making outrageous demands and pushing the locals around. The thought of it made her miserably sad as she resumed walking to the FedEx office, the spring entirely gone from her step. Maybe she could simply not tell her equestrian friends. Sunflower would just disappear, and suddenly there would be a human named Erin. A brief sparkle of hope kindled at the thought before she squashed it. No. Once she was done with this mission, she was done with lies. She would tell her new friends the truth, and face the consequences. Her only hope was that they would understand the desperateness of humanity's situation, and that she did what she needed to do, not what she wanted to do. Of course, that all depended on humanity being welcome to Equestria, rather than just barging in by the billions, cutting down trees, ripping up fields, building new houses all over. And, while she was convinced that the vast majority of humanity would be just as charmed by the locals as she was under no delusions that a large number of people would be belligerent or even hostile to the ponies. That thought made her incredibly sad. Though, the one good thing was that it may not be a permanent move. Humanity might come here in the billions, but if they brought the harmonics equipment with them, then there was no reason that another world, an unoccupied one that would support humanity's multitudes, could be found in a year or two. The only reason that there was any interest in Equestria right now was that there were currently no other options. With that in mind, she felt her resolve to find a way to make this transition as smooth as possible well up within her. She would do everything she could to open diplomatic relations, before humanity came in. She would find a way for humans and ponies to get along peacefully with one another. She would figure out ways to minimize the damage that having that many creatures suddenly appear would do to the equestrian environment. Somehow. She sighed, then glanced up and found herself in an unfamiliar location. Glancing around in confusion, she realized that she had walked right past the FedEx office without even noticing. Giving herself a mental kick in the rear for being so out of it, she turned and walked back to the office. The door was locked, and Erin realized that she must be a little early. However, she could see someone moving around in the background, so she gave a quick knock. The figure moved to the door and opened it. To Erin's surprise, it wasn't Mr. Parcel, but instead a young stallion with a dark grey coat and a short black mane. "Ah, hi. We're not open yet, can you come back in about 20 minutes, the stallion in the doorway said. He started closing the door without waiting on her reply, so Erin quickly wedged a hoof in the door. I'm not actually a customer, she said. I started working here yesterday. Oh, the stallion said, breaking into a smile. You're Sunflower. Yeah, Speedy was just telling me about you. Wow, you're early. Really? Yeah, our last employee usually didn't show up until at least a half hour after we opened. I'm lucky, by the way. He turned and held the door open for Erin, who walked into the office. As he did so, Erin made out the 3 4-leaf clovers that made up his cutie mark. She wondered which came first, the cutie mark or the name. Nice to meet you, Lucky, she said as she made her way inside. Likewise. Let's get you suited up and start getting caught up on those deliveries. Mr. Parcel, working in the back room, was also surprised to see her, Erin noted. She felt a mild curiosity over who this last employee was, that her just showing up for work a few minutes early would cause such excitement. A few minutes later, she had her uniform on, her oversized delivery saddlebags on, and was heading out the door. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. It was another pleasantly busy morning for Erin. She was able to lose herself in her deliveries, which put all the dark thoughts about the future out of her head. She really didn't know how she was going to handle dealing with Applejack and the others once the truth came out. But, at least for now, she didn't have to worry about it. She had been delivering packages for just a couple of hours when she heard an odd little click, and then a brief sound of rushing air. She stopped, startled, looking around to see if anyone else had heard it. The other ponies were all just walking around and talking normally. She was just about to dismiss it as her imagination when she suddenly heard a familiar voice in her ear. Erin, this is Dr. Velchik. Can you hear me? She jumped, startled, and then looked around. She spotted a nearby and empty alleyway and walked into it. Hi, Dr. Velchik, she whispered. I'm kind of in the middle of town right now, so I can't really have a conversation. Oh, I can see that, my dear, the doctor said. I'll make this brief, then. We're in the midst of downloading all the data you've accumulated since we last talked. Is everything going well? Yes. Everything is going great. I now have a place to live and a job, so no worries there. The ponies are really friendly. I think opening diplomatic relations with them will be pretty easy. Also, they aren't the only intelligent species here. There was a brief, tense pause. What do you mean, not the only intelligent species? Dr. Velchik said, sounding surprised. Well, I've seen references to griffins and zebra nations, and I actually met a dragon. Erin couldn't help but feel a little smug about that last part. After all, how many people can honestly say that they've had a conversation with a dragon? A dragon. Seriously. You'll see for yourself in the footage, but yes, they're really adorable creatures, though, nothing like in myths and legends. His name is Spike, and I don't think you need to worry about him burning down Lake Town or anything. Lake Town? What are you talking about? Dr. Velchik replied, sounding slightly confused. From The Hobbit, Smaug burned down Lake Town after Bilbo. She cut herself off, sensing some annoyance from the other end of the line. Never mind, all I meant was that he's smaller than me, and looks about as vicious as a puppy. A purple, scaly puppy, but still a puppy. Ah. Very well, then. Interesting. If ponies are used to dealing with other intelligent species, then hopefully they won't be too xenophobic about meeting humans. Oh, speaking of which, Erin said, as a thought occurred to her. I know I'm not on a diplomatic mission, but one of the ponies I met happens to know the ruling princess of Equestria, who is named Celestia. If you wanted me to, I could see if I could arrange to talk to her. Maybe start negotiations. Erin trailed off hopefully. Those hopes were dashed with the doctor's next words. No, Erin. Absolutely not. Continue gathering data, but don't try to act as a representative of humanity. We have actual diplomats that will negotiate with the equestrian leadership. You are a brave and intelligent young woman, but to put it bluntly, we can't have an amateur stirring things up. Oh, Erin felt pretty disappointed by that, and stared at the ground by her hooves. Erin. You seem upset. What's wrong? It's just. I don't like being a spy, Dr. Velchik. These ponies are nice people, and some of them have been very friendly to me. And here I am, lying about what I'm doing here and even lying about what I am. I could be real friends with some of these ponies, except for the fact that I'm doing nothing but deceiving them. There was a long pause, long enough for Erin to worry if she'd crossed some kind of line. Finally, Dr. Velchik started talking again. I understand that this is difficult. That these ponies are so kind to you, no doubt, makes things even worse in that fashion. However, what you are doing is extremely important. And, at most, it will be just a few more weeks before we feel we have enough data to begin trying to open negotiations. At that point, you can come home, if you wish. Do you feel like you can manage for that long? Yeah. I guess. Everything okay in there? An unfamiliar voice asked. Erin glanced up to see a mint green unicorn with a two-tone green mane looking at her with concern. She suddenly realized that she'd spent the last couple minutes muttering to herself in an empty alleyway. Ah, yes. I'm fine, thank you. I just had to, consult my map. Yes, Erin said, pulling her map out of her saddlebags. The unicorn mare shrugged, smiled at her, then trotted off. Well, they certainly do seem friendly, Dr. Velchik observed. Just remember, you're not a representative of humanity. Erin, this window is about to close. Was there anything else you were concerned with? No, not really. Just, keep me posted on when they'll open negotiations, please. Absolutely. Nice to see you're doing well, Erin. Take care. And with that, there was another crackling noise, and Dr. Velchik was gone. Erin sighed and stepped out of the narrow alleyway and continued on to her next delivery location. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. Erin munched disconsolately on her dandelion salad at the Café Carty. When Mr. Parcel had let her off for her lunch break, she had swung by the market square to see Applejack. But the orange mare had been too busy to talk much, and definitely too busy to take time off for lunch. Also, apparently in another couple of weeks, applebuck season would start up, which meant that AJ would be too busy to come to town very often. Apparently, applebuck season was when the Apple family harvested and stored the bulk of their apples in preparation for the upcoming winter. Erin couldn't really fault her friend for needing to work, but ever since she had talked to Dr. Velchik, she had felt the need for interaction with someone. Obviously, she couldn't really discuss what was on her mind, but just being able to talk might have lifted her spirits somewhat. She finished off her salad and paid, being sure to leave an extra bit for a tip. Her waitress, a yellow earth pony named Junebug, smiled at her as she left. Erin smiled back, in spite of her current mood. Junebug had been a little spacey, but she was a good waitress. No need to let her current funk affect the perky pony, who was just trying to do her job. Erin trudged through the streets of Ponyville, noting that she still had a considerable amount of time left for her break. Mr. Parcel had given her an hour, and only 20 minutes or so had been taken up actually getting lunch. Still feeling slightly peckish, she suddenly decided that the only treatment for her current mood was an application of welcome party cake, and made her way to the Ponyville guest house once again. She opened the door to find Meadowlark inside, humming to herself and dusting away with a telekinetically wielded feather duster in the common area. She smiled at Erin as she walked in and put the duster down. Hi, Sunflower. I'm not trying to be a bother, but did you work out where you were going to be staying? The mayor asked. Oh. Yes, I meant to talk to you, actually. If it would be alright, I'd like to stay here. That's no problem. It's just 5 bits for a week. As Erin dug her coin purse out of her saddlebag, Meadowlark continued by saying, You're our only guest at the moment. Vinyl Scratch and Quicksale both checked out this morning. Vinyl Scratch. Odd name for a pony, Erin thought, counting out 5 bits and handing them over. We never met. I did meet Quicksale, though. She shuddered at the memory. Yes. Him. Meadowlark frowned. Then she smiled and said, changing the subject, have you met my daughter? Daughter. Erin looked back into the common room and saw a small filly curled up on the couch. She was gold-colored with a dark red mane, and was looking at her with quite serious pale green eyes. Oh, no, I don't think we have. Marigold, this is Sunflower. She's a guest. Sunflower, this is my daughter Marigold. Hi, the little filly said, expressionless. It's nice to meet you, Marigold, Erin said, smiling. The filly was simply too adorable. A thought struck her, and she whispered to Meadowlark, say, would it be okay if I gave her some cake? Pinkie Pie threw a welcome party for me yesterday, and she gave me tons to take home. Oh. Well, sure, as long as it's not too much. I don't want to spoil her lunch. Meadowlark turned to her daughter and said, honey, would you like some cake? The filly on the couch perked up instantly and nodded enthusiastically. Erin and Meadowlark shared a laugh at the filly's suddenly earnest expression, and Erin went into her room. She took out one of the huge boxes Pinkie had given her and brought it out. Even minus what Erin herself had eaten that morning, it was still a massive amount of cake. Wow, Marigold said, appreciatively. I can have all of that. No, you can have a piece of it, her mother said sternly. Marigold's face fell, and Erin couldn't help but chuckle. Meadowlark cut the cake, giving each pony a slice. As they ate, Erin and Meadowlark chatted briefly, as Meadowlark seemed interested in finding out what Erin thought of Ponyville so far, and where she was working. Erin filled her in on many of the events of yesterday. She skipped out on her job hunting before ending up at FedEx, though. No need to go through all that again. Marigold didn't really participate in the conversation, having finished her smaller slice of cake before the two adults. She now was spending her time staring at the rest of the cake in the box. Meadowlark sighed and smiled fondly at her daughter. She starts school next year, you know. She kept pestering me to let her go this year, but I kept telling her she's not big enough yet. Too. Marigold had torn her gaze away from the cake long enough to scowl at her mother. Meadowlark smiled back and mussed her mane with a hoof. Not yet, you're not, she said, as the filly tried in vain to bat her mother's hooves away from her head. Erin couldn't help herself, her bad mood was just dissolving in the face of all the cuteness. Sure, Marigold was a bit of a crab, but she was just a little filly, and completely adorable. Well, I suppose I should be getting back to work, Erin said, glancing at the grandfather clock in the corner. My break is up. Oh, feel free to hold on to that cake, if you want. No, it's okay, she said, as Meadowlark started to protest, maybe you can give some out to other guests, if any show up today. And, besides, I have another whole box of it back in my room. There is no way I can eat all that before it gets all stale, so it's better to share it, right? That's true, I guess. Well, thank you, Sunflower. Marigold, what do we say? The filly seemed to consider that quite seriously for a moment before looking up and saying, thank you for the cake, Sunflower. You're very welcome, Marigold, Erin said, smiling back. Erin said her goodbyes to the two unicorns, and trotted out the door. Tilde tilde asterisk tilde tilde. The rest of the day went smoother. Erin knew she'd have to deal with things eventually, but for now she was happy just doing her job and enjoying the weather. Even carting packages around wasn't so bad. The exercise tired her out, but in a good way, that made her feel pleasantly warm. The breeze blowing through Ponyville kept her from getting too warm. She didn't see Lucky around at all, and Mr. Parcel explained that it was his job to take the cart out and make deliveries all around the outskirts of Ponyville. Apparently, most of the surrounding area was farmland, with ponies living, in some cases, miles away. And, once we get caught up with in-town deliveries, Mr. Parcel told her, I'll have you join him. I have a second cart, after all, and that's where a good chunk of our backlog is. Oh. I thought I was getting caught up, but I guess not. Don't get me wrong, darling, you're doing a bang-up job, the older stallion told her, you've got our backlog down considerably. But the hardest deliveries are the ones way out there, in the countryside. Oh, I see, Erin said, and since there didn't seem like much more to say, she loaded back up and trotted back out again. The day went by quickly after that, and before she knew it, it was time to take off the uniform and head out for the day. She asked Mr. Parcel if it was all right to take the uniform home so she could wash it, and the elderly stallion gave his enthusiastic approval. With some difficulty, Erin managed to wedge the bulky uniform coat into her saddlebag. She stepped outside the FedEx office, noting that the sun was already getting close to setting. On a whim, she decided to drop by the library and see if she could borrow some books, then realized with a start that she had never even started on the history of Ponyville book she borrowed the other night. She gave a mental shrug and decided to try it anyway. Twilight Sparkle greeted her warmly at the entrance to the Books and Branches library. Erin explained that she was hoping to check out a couple more books, asking if there were any that talked about the Griffins or the Zebra Kingdoms. Twilight came back quickly with a pair of books, which Erin stashed away in her saddlebags. Twilight apologized about not inviting her in for tea again, but apparently she had a research project that was taking up a lot of her time. Erin smiled and said that it was perfectly fine. She wanted to get into reading that night, anyway. Having made that determination, Erin trotted back to the guest house. She didn't bother going inside, at first, instead stripping off her saddlebags out back and taking her uniform coat out. Giving it a sniff, she flinched back. Yes, 2 days worth of sweating into it, and it was definitely getting a little ripe. Not to mention, who knew whether it had been washed before she tried it on the first time. Erin suddenly regretted not insisting on washing it before wearing it. What if she had gotten fleas? Could ponies even get fleas? She stomped in frustration. She was supposed to be a pony, and here she was, not even sure if she could get fleas or not. She pumped some water into the tub and scrubbed the jacket out thoroughly, then wrung it out. She hung it up on the line to dry overnight, and then trotted in through the back door of the guest house. Maybe one last slice of cake before starting these books, she thought as she opened the door to her room. Then she froze, locking gazes with an intruder. A gold-coated, red-maned intruder with a guilty look on her face, an open cake box in front of her, and cake smeared generously all over her face. The little filly even had managed to get some of the frosting in her mane. Erin couldn't help it. Her back legs gave out and her rump crashed to the floor as she started laughing. The indignant and yet still embarrassed look on the filly's face didn't help, making her laugh even harder. Finally, she wound down. Ribs aching, she stood back up and looked at the shame-faced filly. You know that you shouldn't go into other ponies' rooms, right, Marigold? She asked. Marigold mumbled, looking at her hooves. And, Erin prompted. The filly looked confused for a moment, then blinked in understanding. And, I shouldn't take things that aren't mine. Very good. And, I'm sorry. Pale green eyes on the verge of tears looked up at Erin from over a quivering lower lip. Erin's defenses melted in an instant. Okay. I'll tell you what, Marigold. You promised to never come into some pony else's room without permission again, and I'll accept your apology. And, I won't even tell your mom, because I'm nice that way. Do you promise? I promise. Thanks, Sunflower, the filly said, hugging Erin's leg somewhat stickily before running off. Erin smiled, thinking that at least she had made another friend today. Then she regarded the remains of the cake. The filly had disdained the rest of the pastries, leaving cookies, cupcakes and a single turnover behind, but had made a brave attempt at eating as much cake as humanly possible. She had just started cleaning up when the commotion from the manager's apartment started. Erin winced as she recognized the angry mom voice, which was apparently the same in every dimension. Oh, I really should have told her to clean off her face before she went upstairs. Tilde asterisk tilde. An observer would have noted the air of badly contained frustration. They may have also noted the small black shape in the center of the shifting, roiling shadows. There weren't any observers, though. There hadn't been for centuries. The drone slipped through the entity's grasp once again, and it barely caught it before it hit the ground. There was a low growling sound, which cut off suddenly. Carefully, almost delicately, the entity placed the drone into the furthest corner of the cave, then backed away. Only when it had retreated as far away from the drone as it could did it act, thrashing about wildly and howling with a voice that echoed and harmonized oddly with itself. The entity vented its spleen as fully as it could, lashing out at the walls of its prison and cursing in languages long dead and forgotten. Spectral limbs smashed walls and floors, leaving not so much as a mark. However, even in its madness, it was careful to keep away from the corner where the solitary drone lay, completely dormant. The entity finally slowed to a halt. Most creatures, after such a display, would have been short of breath. But there was no sound of breathing. There was no sound at all. Until, with a scream of purest rage, the shadows threw themselves towards the entrance to the cave. As it impacted the magical barrier, the scream of rage mixed with a howl of pain as the entity was thrown back in a flash of golden magic. It hurled itself at the door to its prison, still raging, again and again. And every time it did, the shield at the door would flash golden, and the shadows would be thrown back. Each time it threw itself at the entrance, with the outside so tauntingly near, a little more rage faded from its voice, replaced more and more with agony. A last attempt and it gave up, retreating back to the darkness, whimpering with the memory of the pain. Then it slept, or came as close as it ever could to sleeping.